Hey, welcome back. Hope you guys had a great week. Today I'm gonna present to you guys for scary stories from Reddit. If you are new to the channel and don't want to miss any crazy creepypasta stories, hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications. Now with that out of the way, let's start with the stories. Blouse on a Hanger by Putzpop. The week had collided into him like a freight train. He was plowed through and wasted without even knowing what hit him. First was the call, then the hospital, then the funeral home, and then the gravestone. It all happened so fast, and she was torn from his life. That was 6 months ago. His kids and him had settled into a robotic existence. They went through the motions of the day with school, work, dinner, and then their respective rooms. The kids dove deep into social media or gaming. He turned on a movie for background noise, drank and sometimes cried. This was their lives now. It was 6 months later and her blouse still hung on a hanger, hooked on the bedroom window balance. He sometimes sat and stared at it in a drunken stupor. One night he began talking to it. "I really miss you, Rachel. I don't know if I can do this. It's been too much," he said and sobbed into his hands. "You have to do this. Your kids need you," said Rachel's echoed voice. He looked up to see Rachel, or at least her head and torso, filled in the blouse on a hanger. She looked at him with a deathly stare. She had an ethereal look to her. He screamed. There was a knock on the door and he rushed to open it. His daughter stood there with a concerned look. "Are you okay, Dad?" she asked. He glanced over to the window where just a blouse hung. "Yes," he said, nodding his head. "I'm good, hon, just a bad dream." She hugged him and told him good night. He slowly closed the bedroom door. He trudged back to the bed and sat down on the edge. He picked up the beer he had on the nightstand and took a swig. "You need to stop drinking. The kids see you doing that all the time." Rachel's voice returned with a gruff voice. "Yeah, whatever," he said, not bothering to look up, figuring his beer buzz was messing with him. He took another gulp, but that tasted like piss, which he immediately spit out and gagged. He looked up and Rachel hung there, filling up the blouse. Her face was sagging as if decomposition had set in from moments before. There were dark veins knifing their way across her skin. "Stop drinking," she demanded. Her head fell off and rolled across the floor over to him. When it came to rest, her eyes rolled up to meet him, then popped. Black goo sprayed him. He became instantly sick and rushed to the toilet to vomit. After heaving, he came back into the room and found an empty blouse on a hanger. He slumped back down on the bed. His stomach was sore from vomiting and exhausted. He decided that maybe beer buzz Rachel had a point, and he should take a break from the alcohol. He laid his head down to slumber and she spoke up again. "Talk to your kids, Jake. They're hurting too and often lay awake at night," Rachel said. Her voice was hollow, barely there. Jake's eyes shot open and he looked over to see Rachel hanging there in her blouse. The meat hung from her skull like rotten curtains. She was grotesque. Her eyes were sunken in and tongue hung slack. He was horrified but challenged. "They won't talk to me about it." His eyes were watery. Rachel blurted, "Help them remember." Her jaw hinged open and hundreds of tiny dots poured from her mouth. They glowed a spectral green and were moving, alive. They scattered across the floor, up onto the bed and towards him. Jacob sat in fear, pulling the blanket towards him. Soon he was covered by them. He saw they were ghostly spiders. They invaded him, every orifice. His mind was quickly flooded with imagery. It was a rapid slideshow of memory. It was Rachel, the kids, and them as a family. It was holidays, vacations, date nights, fun times, love-making, birthdays, and so much more. The depression that latched onto his mind lost its grip. His sadness was pulled away from the ledge. Jake was broken free of the binds. He looked towards Rachel, but it was just a blouse on a hanger. He woke up with a start the next morning. Her blouse was still on a hanger. He put it in Rachel's side of the closet. For the first time in 6 months he felt hope. His head felt clear and far less foggy than it had in a long time. Jake went out to the kitchen and made breakfast for the kids. He knew that he would still grieve, but it was time to be a family again. My Wife is Completely Paralyzed. By WinenOlive. My wife, Corrine, is 24. She was in a horrible accident. A drunk driver hit her head-on, and since then, she's been incapacitated. She has her basic instinct functions, swallowing, chewing, blinking, breathing, but her body just doesn't work anymore. We know her brain is processing her environment, it's just that her body isn't. She's still my beloved Corrine, just a little different now. Corrine has HHC nurse, Elizabeth, who regularly comes in to administer Car's meds and IVs. Obviously I'm there for the whole thing, holding Car's hand and stroking her hair. She's my everything. She never stopped being my everything. The only time I wasn't with Corrine was when she was being bathed or fed. Typically I would be at work during those times. I was insistent on her treatments being administered during the early morning or at night so I could be there. I know she's terrified of the treatments and I wanted to support her as much as I could. Today was different, to say the least. I work as a pharmacist at a hospital. I finished my shift and took a deep breath. I love my job, but I love seeing my wife more. Being away from her is not something I enjoy very much. I drove home as quickly as I could, albeit safely. When I arrived, the vibe felt off. I couldn't quite place my finger on it. Was Corrine okay? Was she responding to her meds negatively? Was the nurse concerned about something? I ran upstairs to find Corrine and Elizabeth watching TV. Hey! I was just waiting for you so we can start meds. Do you want to do them now or get situated or? Elizabeth was an absolute sweetheart. She was always considerate like that. I was still in my scrubs, but they're quite comfortable, so I decided to let them go ahead with the treatments. They always started with the worst one, the nebulizer. Corrine hated the nebulizer. It was loud and big and it was generally really uncomfortable for her. I gave her a kiss on the forehead before Elizabeth began. Car's face twisted in distress. I rubbed her hand with my thumb, to let her know that everything would be okay. A couple minutes passed and finally the treatment was over. Elizabeth gave Corrine's shoulder a quick squeeze before excusing herself. Sorry, Car, I know it's scary. I'll go grab some Ativan and we can start up again in about 20 minutes, okay? She flashed me a sympathetic smile before hurrying to Corrine's bedroom. That's when it happened. As soon as Elizabeth was gone, Corrine grabbed my hand. She squeezed it so tight. Her eyes widened in fear. She whipped her head to look at me. I was completely startled. I thought you were. Corrine's other hand slapped across my mouth. Don't you dare let her hear you. Her whisper was firm and urgent. She's poisoning me. The Fading Sense of Freedom by Unspookableghost. My name is Sarah Reinerson. I was kidnapped due to my poor choice of career as a prostitute. I can't get a job anymore, due to the murder of my ex-husband. I took on the job of a prostitute to tend to my 2 sons. I know they aren't proud of me, but I'm trying. I regret my choices. One day I was kidnapped by a big man who was nothing like I've ever seen. He is the sadistic version of Rube Goldberg and set traps like Jigsaw. I wasn't the only one. There were 3 other girls. One of them would not shut up and screamed for hours. I can't blame her. The other was very quiet and barely seemed worried she was kidnapped. Her most defining trait was a poorly drawn pair of cherries tattooed on her face. And the last one, you barely knew was there, seemed to be always thinking. She had a very strange fascination with the kidnapper and riddles, as she was the one who was here the longest. The kidnapper had a big house that was split down the middle. Basically 2 houses in one, but the walls were very thin, ironic, for a kidnapper. He kept us in his basement to hide from his family, who frequently visited, and would regularly transfer us from one house's basement to the other. I miss my kids so much. I'm hoping they are doing fine without me, but I promise I'll try to get back as soon as I can. The kidnapper said he had been stalking me for months, and grew a fondness to me without knowing me. He said he did that to all the girls. He would tell us about his past jobs as a police officer and at an office. He would never shut up about how I was ugly but had a perfect body, and the cherry girl was the opposite. He despised the loud one. That girl couldn't really talk back, as most of the time her voice was destroyed from screaming. He somehow made a crawlspace door into the neighbor's basement, knowing they don't go in there. You may wonder why he told us that. He said the door is so heavy and made such that if it fell on you, it would pierce your body, forcing you to scream and alert the neighbors. I thought he kidnapped us, for just sex. However, after catching a glimpse of what arouses him, I think I realize why there's 4 of us. The last day I remember, the kidnapper left a message carved into the back of the basement door which said, "Creation is the next step." On my way towards the door to get a better view of the carved message, I accidentally tripped on an almost invisible wire in the dark basement. It was connected to the metal storage closet, causing to come slamming down on my right leg. I screamed in pain. To which my other victims didn't respond. Soon I passed out. I woke up on the dirty shower floor of his basement bathroom, with extreme pain all around my face. I clawed at the damp wallpaper in pain, thinking to myself in confusion, about how my face wasn't damaged when the closet fell on me. I yanked the chain on my leg onto the shower wall, trying to make the least noise, until it came off. I barely stood up with my damaged leg, using the bathtub as support to guide myself to the mirror. As my face was flaming, I wiped the foggy mirror to see what I'd imagined to be his dream woman. My face was sticked horribly, looking nothing like my true self anymore. I racked my brain, thinking it was due to the fall, until I realized something horrifying. On the edge of the rough stitching was that damn cherry tattoo. I went cold. I was about to scream louder than I ever have, until in the mirror, I saw another note, carved on the bathroom door. "Please don't scream, my sweet girl. My mommy and my younger brother is visiting in the other house." I slowly opened the door and tried to step over an obvious tripwire, until my damaged leg gave in and I stomped on it. I stood in shock until a large hunting knife shot at me, grazing my ankle. I covered my mouth as I cried. I stood up shakily and took the knife off the ground. I left and started to head back to the basement. I realized there was no way to get to the other house from the basement until I heard something. You guys. I made it. I made pork ribs. I wasn't in the other house. I felt the adrenaline rush to escape. I stood on the tipped-over metal closet and slowly cut a hole in the ceiling to let the light of the living room into the basement. As the light hit the basement, I realized I wasn't alone. Loud Girl was in the corner, but no trace of Cherry Girl or the mysterious one. I told her to come on and we can finally get out as he's distracted. She tried to speak but only squeaked as her voice was completely gone. I walked closer to her and she saw my face. She took the knife and carved something in the wall. He made me watch everything. She was so broken, I'm sure she didn't even remember her own name. I held her as she cried, hugging her tightly, stroking her rough, soft hair. I think that was the only moment in months that she felt comfortable, and that made me feel at ease. We got up and slowly unscrewed the door off with the dull side of the knife. Until we heard his family leave, and the door handle slowly shift. We ran to the dark side of the basement as he was coming down the stairs, after seeing the hole in the ceiling. We huddled into the dark corner until we found a crawl space we never knew about. It had a very rickety-made door. Since there's two of us, I held the door up as she squeezed herself into the crawl space, and then she did the same as I followed. Her hand slipped, making the sharp door almost fall. It got so close to impaling me in multiple places, but she caught it in time. We made it to the other house's basement. As we got in, we saw this basement had a light. Turning it on, we realized this was nothing like the other house's basement. It looked completely different. We looked to the corner, seeing the back of a body. We went and turned it around, only to see that it was the Cherry Girl. Meaning the kidnapper hid her body in his neighbor's basement while they were away. She laid there slumped on the wall with her face violently torn off and her chest ripped open. Her ribs missing. She was barely alive and most certainly brain dead, as she didn't even move her eyes to look at us or scream. All she did was sit there and breathe loudly. The loud girl cried at my side. I picked up a fire poker which was laying nearby to put her out of her misery. We both cried hard as I forcefully jammed it in her exposed heart. It wasn't until the deed was done that I realized she moved her eyes to see me pick up the fire poker, meaning she was definitely still alive. I dropped the poker and grasped the loud girl's hand, and we opened the basement door, believing it was outdoor to freedom. We soon realized the door didn't lead outside, as we saw the neighbors sitting at their kitchen table ready to eat the ribs their neighbor gave them. Everyone screamed at the sight of me, as the father took out his police-grade pistol and shot me straight in the face.
No!
Loud girl held me crying, covered in my blood, as the sense of freedom and the light left my sad eyes. As my body slumped over, they got a good view of Cherry Girl's mangled body. The mother covered the kid's eyes, and the father reloaded. Loud girl cleared her throat as hard as she could, trying to talk, but the father reloaded and blew her brains out too. The kidnapper got cold feet after hearing all the ruckus. He wanted to retrieve Cherry Girl's body as soon as possible. He went to the basement and decided to test the crawlspace door. He slowly crawled, scared for his life, and he was almost there. He got confident and increased his pace, but he celebrated too quickly as he heard a snap and the door slammed down, impaling him all over his fat ass. He screamed in agony as his blood pooled around him, alerting the neighbors. The cops came as soon as they were called and forcefully removed the kidnapper from his own trap. Weeks after the incident, he confessed to his crimes and got life in prison. The girls went down in history as brave survivors with courage enough to escape the kidnapper, and the family got let off with self-defense. Nothing is known about what happened to Sarah's kids or if they knew about their mom. Nothing is known about the families of the victims, but one thing is certain. The kidnapper's house was torn down due to the events attached to it. As it was being torn down, the workers saw a note on a door in the wreckage. It read, "The branch has broke free from the tree that is no longer with thee. Come and find me." They thought that was from the original kidnapper. They realized later that the carving was freshly done when that specific door was examined. 2 workers traced it back to the woods and were never heard from again. Months after the incident, it came winter, and a hunter was out simply hunting in the woods. He was crouching behind a log waiting for a deer to pass. He got tired of waiting after a while and walked deeper in the woods until he found a deer. He quickly tried to find a place to hide to shoot it. While he was searching for a hiding spot, the deer was suddenly shot with an arrow from one of the trees. It fell to the ground. As he reached for his gun, a figure in a hooded attire appeared behind him and smacked him down with the back of a crossbow. He groaned and tried to sit up as they restrained him, and he yelled, "Who the fuck are you? Help!" They knocked him back down with the butt of his own gun. Then the figure took off the hood slowly. It was the mysterious girl with a familiar face poorly sewed on. She stamped her foot on his chest, jamming an arrow into his heart. He screamed and cried, "Who are you? Why?" She left his body with her boots in the snow, as she angrily said, "My name is Sarah Reinerson." Preschool Teacher Story by Pendant_Fawn. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little drunk, so sorry for any spelling errors. Anyways, I am a preschool teacher and kids are weird. We all know they are in tune with the paranormal, right? Right. So this was my first year working in preschool as an assistant teacher. There's this one little girl that just starts out. She's 3 years old. She doesn't get along with the other kids as well, but she talks to me a lot. She goes on and on about this other kid, presumably a sibling or something. She talks about how they spend time together, play games, go to the park. I'm like, wow, what a cute sibling relationship. The name of this other kid will be Jane for the purpose of this conversation. Obviously a real name and something a 3-year-old wouldn't come up with. One day, Dad picks up and I'm making small talk. I say, "So when am I going to get to meet Jane? Student talks about her all the time." Dad gets quiet. Like he knows, but wants to pretend like he doesn't, and then he's like, "Who?" And I say, "Oh, I thought she had a sibling. Jane? She talks about her, and all the fun stuff they do all the time." And he's like, "No, she doesn't have siblings." He doesn't say anything else awkwardly, and then he leaves with his kid quickly. The next day, I'm all curious, so I ask the kid while she is doing an art project. I ask. So who is Jane? She dead-ass stops what she doing, goes blank-faced, looks at me with the most dead eyes I've seen a 3-year-old give and says, "She's the girl who watches me sleep through my window at night." Bro, when I tell you I shit my pants. I asked her to draw a picture. I don't know if you know this, but 3-year-old are ass at drawing pictures. So it was just a circle person with stick legs and arms and a triangle bow on her head. But that isn't all. I actually babysat this kid a few times. Her bedroom was on the 2nd floor of their house. There wasn't a tree there for anyone to climb up or anything. And I asked her if so-and-so still watched her sleep, and she was like, "No. Mommy and Daddy went to a church, and since then Jane stopped coming over to play with me." That was all for today. Glad you guys listened till the end. Don't forget to like the video and share with your friends. Also send in your own scary stories at horroxperiencemedia@gmail.com so your work can get featured in my videos. You can find a link in the description. Subscribe for more similar stories and see you guys in the next video.